It's late in the afternoon, so you must have a lot of energy, which is why you've stayed here. And I'm here to talk to you about mining Africa's imagination and the power of light. Shining the light on Africa, from David Edison. I think you've all heard about Africa, and especially recently, we're talking about Africa, the rising continent, the Economist calls us, Africa, the resilient continent, development institutions like mine call us, Africa, the lion, McKinsey calls us. So we have all these positive names, all these prosperous names for Africa. And I think that every one of us has, I think if I take a moment, Africa, what's the word that comes to mind? You must have yours as well. Sometimes I call mine the gazelle. The gazelle runs for a long time. It's a marathon runner. But then there's an Africa with 589 million people that is not rising, that is not running. And I want to talk to you about that Africa. If you look at that Africa, if today Africa were to rise, we only have 32% of the population that has access to energy. This is not an Africa that can run a marathon through the last mile. As you know, for a marathon, you have to start slow, pick up pace in the second third, and then finish strong in the last third. But the last third is the most important. Africa today is about to begin the last third of that marathon. And that's what I want to talk to you about, how we can make sure that we finish that marathon. This is the fading light bulb of Africa. This is not the Africa rising. If you look at it, almost only 7 countries out of the 49 countries have 50% access to electricity or energy. There is no power. But why do we worry about power? We don't worry about power because we need women to go to the hospital. We worry about power because we need to unleash the productive mind of the continent. We don't need to determine why people need power. We need to give it to them so they can invent, so that they can innovate. And this is the whole point. This is the principle. If you look at the East Asia tigers, when they got power, they started rising. That is what a rise looks like. It is continuous, it is persistent, and it stays. It doesn't fall. The Southeast Asian countries, if you look at them, the same trajectory, rising. We know from our statistics and the work that has been done at the World Bank that for every 1% growth in GDP, you get the 1% increase in power consumption, or vice versa. One way or the other, you need power to grow. We are not getting enough power on the continent. We have a huge deficit. According to World Bank studies, the whole of the African continent has as much power as South Korea, which only has 80 million people. The African continent has 800 million people. This is the race that we're running today on the continent. If you look at those countries, all these are resource-rich countries. From 1971 to 2011, does that look like we're winning this race? I think we need to run faster. I think that this last mile of the race is going to be a much more difficult race because we are not consuming more power. On average, Africa consumption per capita on power is only 500 megawatts. We need 1,000 per capita to be able to grow and grow sustainably. So there is a problem on the continent. There is 590 of us on the continent that need to be able to unleash their imagination, that need to work longer hours. Today on the continent, we have 590 people whose days only begin when the sun rises and their days end when the sun sets. Imagine how much time wasted, how much innovation and creation wasted. We will never know because they don't have a chance to tell us. We have 7 more years and 7 more miles to run. I am here to say that today Africa can meet that challenge. By 2020, if we put our minds together, crowdsource innovation, we should be able to power the continent, or at least have half of the continent with more than 90% access to electricity by 2020. Not by 2030. By 2030, that race will be over. I know that many people say we should do this by 2030. I'm here to put the challenge that we can, and we will do it by 2020 if we put our minds together. This is what Vietnam did. In the space of 10 years, Vietnam was able to go from 20% to 90% access. There is no reason why Africa cannot do the same. There is no reason why with the resources that we have, we cannot do the same. If you look at the resource-rich countries on the continent, we have at least 40 resource-rich countries on the continent. Clearly, with hydro, we can power the continent. As you can map, Ethiopia can power the continent. Guinea, DRC, Sudan, Mozambique, Cameroon, all these countries have less than 50% access to electricity today. I'm here to say that we can meet the challenge of 7 by 20. 7 by 20 means that we will, at the end of the last 7 miles of this race in 2020, we should have more than 70% of the population with access to energy in Africa. We also have natural deposits of gas. I'm standing in a country that has the largest deposits of natural gas on the continent. It can transform that into miracles, into a better Hollywood, into a better Nollywood, into better ideas. We know of the power and the imagination of the Kenyan youth today. Imagine if you were to spread the power and the of the Kenyan youth across the continent. This is what we want to do with power. We don't only want to cure AIDS, we don't only want to talk about the MDGs, we want to talk about a better Africa. This is where we are today when you do not have power. That is the grinding machine. This is the grinding machine that was invented in 1847. Many of us today are still in our families using the grinding machine. 3, 4, 5 hours to grind corn. In the developed world, it takes 15 minutes to grind corn. That is the waste of the continent. That is the waste of the African mind that we must revolt against. We must stop. This is what happens when you can grind it at scale. You can grind it faster, you can create more jobs, and you can grow faster. This is the innovation that's happening on the continent. It's useful innovation. It's important innovation. But do we really need to keep riding a bike to charge our microphones and our iPhones today on the continent? This is a young Kenyan student who came from the Technical University of Kenya. I'm sure he can imagine bigger things. I'm sure he can imagine greater things. We surely celebrate his innovation of riding a bike and charging a cell phone. But it takes 1 hour to ride that bike and charge a cell phone. You and I can do much better in that 1 hour. That is the waste of the African continent today, which we must direct to new innovation and to new inventions. I want to show you Cheikh Anta Diop. Cheikh Anta Diop, in 1847, he was born. By 1901, he was inventing the carbon dating methodology. The carbon dating methodology is a methodology that tells you how old the human bone is. What is the origin of man? He's an ethnographer who was one of the first people to challenge the theories of race. He was able to do this because he had light. He was able to think broader than he was allowed to think at that time because there was light. He could do his experiments and he could challenge innovation. This he did in Senegal. I think we can all become Cheikh Anta Diop. We can all create these new innovations that pioneer our continent, our generation, our race, and our beliefs. But we need light first. Back to these countries that are resource-rich and have access. How are they going to get from access to light, from resources to light? Kenya today has rare earth metals that are worth $62 billion. Nobium that's worth $35 billion. We say that we need $10 billion to power Kenya. Of course, you can use collateral. Collateral, as we all know, is what you use when you want to buy a house in the developed world. Collateral is what you use when you want to buy a car. We have our minds. Our minds are our collateral. We need to transform them from the resource curse to the collateral benefit. We need to use our minds to be able to power our mind. We need to use those minds in a different way. We cannot wait 17 years. If Kenya were to take only 5% from each of its minds over the next 5 years, collateralize it, and create transformational power today, Kenya will grow much faster in the future. When I talk about powering the mind and how we can raise these resources, if you look at the companies that have recently raised large resources from the capital markets, you have General Electric, we have Rio Tinto, and we have Ford that just raised $1 billion. Not very long ago, as we all know, Ford was a company in problems. Africa in the 80s was a company in problems. Africa in the 90s was a company that came out of problems. Africa in 2000 is a thriving company. We should be able to raise $10 billion to power each of our countries based on our minds. I think this is the challenge that I want to put today. This is my dream. My dream is that we can innovate based on our resources. We need to think differently. In Nigeria, you need to move from 50% access to electricity to 90% access to electricity because you are the largest exporter of oil on the continent. You can collateralize that oil. You can bring it forward and you can transform energy. You can create energy, you can create innovation. So what's the dream? What's the dream I leave with you? The dream I leave with you is a simple one. It's one that says we must move away from talking about governance around our to talking about how we mind into resources that will power our mind. how we transform those minds into resources that would light our ideas, how we transform those minds into resources that will create jobs for our youth, how we transform those minds into resources that will change our cities, our villages, and of course, feed our people. That is the dream that I have. It's a dream that we can do by 2020, and I leave it to you. Thank you.